great to see you here at the Junos. You're nominated. How's it feel to be nominated for Junos?
That's great. It's awesome to be kind of, the Junos are an opportunity, I think, to kind of reflect on the past year. We're a band that focuses pretty hard on kind of pushing forward, and it's a great opportunity to kind of stop and celebrate a year with your band, and I think that we're all pretty excited to just kind of stop the watch for the weekend and enjoy it. As we're on tour, we're working on touring the first one down south and stuff. We are starting work on the second one, and I'm so glad that we waited until now. And it's been a hard process at times because we want to put out new material. Obviously, you can understand that because every other artist has said that for the history of time. But it's really important to us that we're able to take a big step with this next one. So it's with the first record, I'm just so happy for the success it's had, and we hope that it can kind of continue its growth in the States and in Europe.
It seems like that's a big component, is the live performance for you guys.
Nothing beats being a human in a room with another human in a room.
It's the least superficial way of kind of playing music and being a performer in front of people, you know? It's like it's
analog.
Yeah.
That is analog and romantic. It's like letter writing.
I mean, it'd be nice, I think we always talk about when we go back into the studio of trying to capture, what's going on live, in a record, but I think that, like, once again in the history of time, that's something that every artist has said or tried to do, and the reality is that they're completely two different worlds, and I think at this point what we're kind of, how we're approaching it is just understanding that there are going to be things that work really well in the sonics and the world of a record that we shouldn't, look as precious and as having to be kind of translated literally live.
How do you make something that's unique and familiar at the same time?
Oh man, I think if I knew, then you'd be a millionaire. But the difference, I guess, is probably just because we made it so early in the band. And I felt like all of us were coming from totally different kind of musical backgrounds. And the music that I'd been involved in leading up to starting July Talk, I didn't feel satisfied. I felt like it was very confrontational music that didn't really want an audience, which is really fun and important, and I think that music should exist. But I think that we all kind of took a step into this band knowing what we wanted, and I think Josh and I had a film company in Toronto that we did music videos and stuff together, and so we knew each other through that, but the music we made was very different. Leia had a band that was very different. Ian and Danny were quite different, so I guess it just allowed us to, within 5 shows, like within our first 5 shows, we were recording that record. We didn't have any time to grow before recording it. And so I don't think we were worried about crossing genres. I don't think we were worried about anything like that. We didn't try to define our voice. There's songs that sound like totally electronic, and there's songs that sound like a live off the floor blues recording on the album. And it didn't really matter to us. I think moving forward, as we write more, we're probably defining our voice a touch more just because of the way we play live. But we're still very interested in the fact that our 2 voices really ground us, right? We didn't go over the top on harmonies on the first record because we were both pretty green singers. Like I had never been the lead singer before. I knew what my voice could do in a very specific way, and I feel like I've learned to explore that a lot better since, and I feel a lot more confident than I did.
Leia, you used to, from what I read, do performance art. How has that aesthetic or idea influenced what you do in July Talk?
Well, I still do. It's still something that I do when I have time to outside of the band. But what I find important about any sort of performance is that there's always just like a really honest aspect of it, and that you're never trying to be something that you're not in terms of persona, but also just in that I think that the magic of performance exists when you actually take into account what's going on in the world that day and the humans in the room and the feeling in the air, and kind of keep things fluid. And so I'd say that absolutely affects, well, first of all, the live show, but also the songwriting and the way that our day-to-day conversation and everything we go through post-show, during the show, post-tour, on the road, in the gas station, like all those things come into play when we're constructing songs. And
I think people probably assume, Peter and Leah, that you guys are a couple all the time because of the stage aspect and the way you sing together and all that kind of stuff.
We always use the example of, you know, if Bruce Springsteen and his wife are singing on stage, they always do Tougher Than the Rest together or whatever. And one show he's doing it alone. Those are two totally different kind of performances, and people appropriate all kinds of ideas as soon as there's a man and a woman singing towards each other.
Yeah.
And it's not so important to us to communicate what's actually going on or anything, but we like to just exercise and experiment with that dynamic, right? Like I was just saying, it allows you to see it from two sides, and the audience is going to completely assume whatever they're going to assume. They're going to assume we hate each other, that we're brother and sister, that we're in love, and we've gotten it all. And we spur it on because it makes the show push itself forward, and we enjoy kind of experimenting with it. And I think we've touched the absolute surface of it. I think that there's a wealth of things, and I think also because of the way women were portrayed in music throughout the 70s and 80s, and kind of with grunge there was a really cool push away from it, but often bands that did sort of duet style stuff were kind of forced to be like lead singer and then like a kind of a backup thing. And so there's so much room within the what would you call it, a genre, I guess. You can't really call it a genre, but just like the male-female dynamic, to be really honest about it and say we're like the human side of it.
having a man and a woman on stage singing is one thing, but it's like as soon as you place a male and a female next to each other, even not doing anything, not touching each other, it's like if they're standing like this, that means something. If they're standing like this, if they're standing like this, all of those actions are readable. And it's just like an unfortunate thing about societal norms. But we're in a really cool spot where we can F with people. Like, while gender plays a lot into the songs we're singing and the things we're talking about, Peter could just as easily be a woman and we could be two females fronting this band, or I could just as easily be a man and it would be, you know, it would be the same, it would be different, but it's more about our energies and our like performance methods or something like that
That's
are
how
what
you-
make it interesting.
It's how you are two humans as opposed to man or woman.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the hope, yeah.
I mean, it's, you know, symbolism exists within, like, kind of like what Leia was saying, you know, exists within any performance. So if you're putting a man and a woman together on stage, people are, invariably going to look at a symbol within that and say, you know, what is the body language revealing? I think it's like, though you want to try to get away from that, the band is incredibly conscious that that exists. And, for these two, at least I notice they take great responsibility in making sure that that opportunity is taken advantage of.
Unfortunately, like, you notice that Leia and I are very comfortable with each other, and I can do anything like grab her face or do all these things, and it's not like a weird thing for us, and we do it all the time on stage. And there's been stuff on social media that's popped up of seeing stuff where people have really misconstrued that idea and seen it as a violent thing between us, and that's been a really like hard thing to see. So like Josh is saying, there's an opportunity to take advantage of that, but there's also an accountability and a responsibility to see that your actions, mine toward a woman toward a man, blah blah blah, it's a loaded subject, right? And so you want to be careful with it, and I'm starting to understand that responsibility as time moves forward, but it's been very new. Like it hasn't struck me until very recently.
Well, sex is such a huge part of rock and roll as well, and I think that we totally take advantage of that and like exploit it.
I understand, or at least I was looking at some of the song titles in our database, and you guys do a lot of like splitting the shares between the whole band when you do
Of course,
songs.
yeah.
Is that, like, what's the idea behind splitting all the shares? Do you write them all together, or is it just a thing of let's keep the band together and share it all, or what's that
Everything's
from?
written together, so from kind of the get-go, it was just kind of, I don't know, we always used to kind of go away and try to write, off in a cabin somewhere, and the things, and it goes back to what we were saying about accountability, like, we're always on each other about, the best ideas and perfecting ideas, and we're heavily editing the songs as we go and stuff. But just we would never dream of any sort of split thing where, oh, I wrote this part and he wrote this and I wrote that, because it's just not it's not productive, and we're all in this together, and it's important for us to kind of stay that way, and
And early on in a group, it's like you can say, okay, an idea came from here, an idea came from here, but in the end, it's like the sound of the band came from everyone bringing, kind of what they bring, and then very quickly, just it was like 5 people in a room writing melodies, progressions, lyrics, and I can't. It boggles my mind when I hear that other bands do it differently.
And how the dynamic and the touring and
being
you're up, like you load out of the venue at 3:30 and you're in the airplane by 6 a.m. and you're looking at the songwriter and you're getting paid, $50 a day or whatever stupid wages. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. I don't understand how any band like that lasts.
We better be careful because there's probably a lot of
I guess. Sorry.
We're like that, but
the bottom line is that you're all sacrificing the same amount, and so it just makes sense that
It works for us.
Yeah.
We should say it works for us.
Where most of the time do the songs come from? Is it more like a lyric line that'll spur you on, or a riff, or an idea, or a feeling, or all of that?
It depends on where we're at. I think if we're on tour a lot, then usually it could start with a lyric, and Josh will have a progression and we'll kind of link it up. I think at this point, because we've been writing for the last few months straight, we're more on the kind of music first and then write the lyrics as the song kind of comes together.
But it's never the same though, right?
Yeah, every song I guess would be different.
Something that we're becoming really comfortable with is that you can't quantify the process, and especially with obviously the pressure of a second record, what it has to be. We're in this really kind of great momentum now of understanding that every song that we get to finish, where we're proud of it at the end, it's a gift, and we can't say where it's from, and it came about in a completely different way from the next.
And they take just as long. All the ones that you're happy with take just as long to finish as the ones that you never play again, and they go in the garbage can. And that's the thing that you also have to commit to, is that you will write songs and feel the whole process that this is going to be the greatest feeling, and then you get to the end and it's just there's nothing there, and you've beaten the song to death to try to get it. And so Josh is completely right. There's no method to it.
What advice would you have for young SOCAN members coming up, maybe in terms of writing in a band? What would you suggest as the best piece of advice you give to them?
I always come back to my authenticity over originality. And I think that kind of brings us back to one of your first questions, and kind of say, how do you do that thing where it's familiar, yet you're still putting, kind of providing a new perspective on it. And I think in the end, it's just you have to be a fan of music, and if you are a fan and listen to a lot of music, you are going to hear those influences come into what you do, but don't be afraid of that. Kind of embrace it, because ultimately it's, there's only so many chords, there's only so many progressions, so many melodies. And there's very few geniuses who, kind of are 20 years ahead of their time and kind of break that mold. So I think it's if you're working on something and it's vibing, and, you can identify what those influences are, by the time it passes through your filter, it could be no one else might be able to hear that. And you're just kind of continuing the story of songwriting.
I think in terms of a band, because collaboration is such a mysterious process, everyone obviously wants to be the best at everything and known for everything and their ability to do this, and this. But if you are embarking on a 3 or 4 or 5 or 6-way project, it really makes sense to be in constant communication, and also just to always be honest about those things, about where your strengths lies and where you can improve and where you can learn. And just keep learning.
Congratulations. And can you tell us a little bit about what the next album is going to look like, what it's going to feel like, some sense of it, even though I know you're in the initial stages?
Not really.
Kind of top secret information. We're working very hard on it, but the plan is to just write as much as possible and then whittle it down to what we feel to be the cream of the crop.